Right, good afternoon, nearly lunchtime. I think first and foremost I ought to say that I'm not an IT expert. I'm a business person, but had to by default understand IT enough to be able to sort of help companies that are struggling with it. I'm going to talk about operational recovery. I'm not going to go into the financial aspects of recovery, so we're not going to about debt restructuring, all that sort of stuff. It's purely operational. I hope that you'll take a few snippets here because none of the organisations I've worked with saw this coming. It's not the sort of stuff that you normally put forward when you're doing your scenario planning for disaster recovery. These are business decisions that have had huge implications on some fairly significant organisations. Now, I'm in a difficult position because I could be in breach of trust of certain organisations that have been in a bit of a pickle and have employed me to help them with that. So if I get really boring, I guess the game you can play is try and work out which businesses it is. You probably know who they are, but I'm clearly, hopefully, not going to give away too much. Okay. So in terms of an agenda, first of all, a bit of context. What sort of companies have I worked with? Some of them you may work in that environment, some you may not, but hopefully there's an element of credibility about what I'm saying. It's going to be fairly generic. It can only be generic in the time that I have, but hopefully there are some real trends that you'll see coming through it, and you'll spot those, maybe in your organisation, maybe you can start seeing those things starting to perhaps happen in your organisation. In terms of the causes, we headline view in terms of what the causes were, and then starting to look at some of the compounding factors around the cause, i.e. what made it worse. And we'll talk about some of those. Relationships are absolutely key in this, and I'll share with you a slide that I got from another business school near Milton Keynes, which I think, although not literally, but metaphorically what it is showing, I think is really, really key in terms of relationships between suppliers, customers, internally and externally. And I think it provides a good mantra for organisations, both in the context of recovering and also in preventing it happening. We then start getting a bit more positive and look at some of the key enablers that I found have worked in terms of allowing organisations to recover. And to take the point, we are going to some fairly extreme scenarios here with organisations. So it's really back to first principles, but it does happen. I think that's the key message. It's not formulaic, but I guess that there is a sort of path that has tended to have evolved really in terms of how you recover. And I'll take you through those stages that seem to work and what role IT can play in supporting organisations that are in this particular predicament. Prevention is clearly better than a cure, and I may be doing myself out of a job here, but there are things that I think that IT are uniquely placed to be able to support organisations in preventing them getting into the pickle that these companies have done. And finally, help is on hand. I am here, and I'm delighted to be here, sponsored by Rimini Street, who have supported clients of mine, and there are other clients who I'm sure would wish that they had done. So I'm making no apologies for that. They've been great in supporting us. And we'll finish with a Q&A around it. Okay, context. As Alison said, I started doing this sort of work, believe it or not by design, many years ago as a young army captain in an operational environment where a base I was asked to take over had, shall we say, the other side had a go at it. It had crumbled, literally, and we'd kind of lost control of the area around there, and it was quite a difficult spot. So that's the first example I had of disaster recovery, if you like. And the principles, little did I know it at the time, bear true now, actually, in what I do, as they did at that time. And good old military training, it's not crawling through the bushes, it's about structure, actually, and communication. The two pharmaceutical companies, one I'm working with at the moment, another one is a much bigger company, which you will all know. It's very big. It wasn't a disaster situation, but they needed to take control of their operation. It was getting too big and they were losing control of it. I've worked for a central government department. There may be some strong clues as to who that was soon. And a healthcare provider. It was a healthcare provider that went from 0 to 1.5 billion turnover with the same team, and then it went bang. I've also worked for what I've called a traditional heavy manufacturing business. They are a FTSE 100 business. It was a large subsidiary of that organisation. who were persuaded, and getting to the IT, they were persuaded that the answer to all their problems was to put in an ERP system. And it was going to solve all their problems. Actually, it went horribly, horribly wrong. Just again to stress, it's operational, but there'll be a very heavy slant in terms of IT on it all. I guess I've been doing this, I ought to say, for about 11 years now. I didn't go out seeking trouble, but it kind of followed me, I suppose. So what have been the causes? So it was the best intentions these businesses got themselves into a pickle. They were business decisions that were taken. Some of them have been around following a strategy to avoid paying tax. I'm told that actually it's what grown-up businesses do. They try to minimize their tax liability, which is fine, but actually there are operational and IT implications of so doing. And these guys have got themselves into trouble doing it. Other organizations have tried to make themselves look more attractive to investors, be it the stock market or others. And again, a decision was made at board level, in one particular case by the chief exec. The others weren't bought into it, and he drove it through. And again, they weren't ready for it. A big bang, and it went horribly wrong. Another organization decided what it would do was outsource its core USP. They would outsource it because it was going to be a cheaper to do it that way, and they believed they could get better service levels. And again, they didn't do it properly. They blamed the company that they outsourced it to. I'd suggest actually it was their fault. They didn't do the proper due diligence required to do that, both in terms of systems and operationally. The other one, big hint, for which government department I was working for and helping, there was a pandemic influenza hit, and the government got kind of thrown by that, and they needed some support operationally, believe it or not, to sort what could potentially be a national disaster. And the military operation we've talked about before. So what are the compounding factors? And I guess when you do what I do, you have to be fairly direct, not blunt, but direct in what you say. So if I'm coming across as a bit direct, I apologize, but it's what I see. Culture. And I go to extremes, and these organizations I've worked with are at extreme ends of the culture. One, I guess they would call it entrepreneurial spirit. An organization that's grown incredibly fast with a team of entrepreneurs where the deal is absolutely king. And anybody that dares to slow down that deal by talking about detail is dull. Anybody who suggests that they're identifying risks and challenges to what they're doing is kind of dismissed, because actually stop being a purveyor of doom when actually what happened in this organization particularly, and that's what they really needed to hear. An example, I guess, of that one would be one of the organizations was set up. It was an entrepreneur, a nurse, and a finance guy. And they started with 120 patients, and they were delivering products and dispensing products to individuals to their homes. They grew within a period of 10 years to 1 million patients and about about 1 million patients and a 1.5 billion turnover. That organization, 10 years on, was operating an accounts package, was their entire IT network. That accounts package has not been touched for 10 years. They hadn't moved on from it because the accountant understood it. And there were various patches, there were various upgrades and things that required, they just ignored it. He was also the CIO. And funny enough, when they decided to outsource what they were doing, the whole thing absolutely cascaded around them. So he had his own little sacred cow, but it worked for them. They got away with it, they fudged it, they improvised, they adapted, lots of sticky plasters around the operation, kept it going, and they kept getting more and more business. But in the end, they caught up with them. Corporate. Some of the organizations I've worked with are really large. There's a whole different culture there. One, I'd say almost a complacency. We're so big, nothing can happen to us. We have a big name, we're clearly going to be fine. People are very comfortable in that environment, and people tend to be focused on their own careers. So they avoid conflict. I don't mean conflict in an aggressive way, I mean conflict in terms of challenging each other. They don't like to challenge each other. Their resistance to change, and this whole challenge piece will keep coming back to that. You've got a lot of people there that you could bounce stuff off, and it just doesn't happen. They tend to sit in their own, which is my second area, their own silos. What I've seen in organizations, they've kind of grown amorphously over a period of time, a lot of UDI, if you like, or IACs set up, And the connectivity between the systems is really, really exposed in a time of crisis. There just isn't that throughput of information. And because of the cultures, there isn't this end-to-end view of what's going on. There isn't any empathy between operations, finance, accounts, whatever it might be. And that causes a real concern at the time of crisis. And these are big, established organizations. So there isn't this joined-up approach, this joined-up understanding of needs and requirements of different parts of the business, because it's just not talked about, and it's never challenged. The next one, and this is kind of the key one, it links to the other one, is about a lack of appropriate relationships. That's both internally between different departments within the company, not understanding each other, what needs to be done, and externally with customers and suppliers. So just moving on, as I said before, this is a slide that I stole from Cranfield. I did something there about 20 years ago. Conceptually, it's absolutely right. It may not be perfect, but it's absolutely right. The hypothesis that Cranfield worked on was the fact that the only time you can truly understand the strength of your relationship with people is when failure happens. It's the reaction of the customer to that failure. And they define it based on two axes, as you can see there, one of which is the depth of the relationship you have with a customer, and the other one is the customer's perceived understanding of what you can do and, more importantly, can't do. People find it very, very difficult to say, we can't do this, or even hard to say, we can't do this now, but actually, give us a bit of time, give us a bit of a spec of what you need, and let's work together to find a solution to what you want to do, and start challenging, is that really what you want? Okay. Just taking one or two examples from there, if you take the relationship bit, so imagine a scenario where you think you have a very strong relationship with someone. It probably means you go for beers with them, you have dinner with them, you might know the wife or whatever else, and you think you're great. You have a very strong relationship, but you never really face into the issues about work, what can and can't be done at work. You don't challenge it. So when it goes wrong, the customer feels utterly betrayed. I thought we were friends. I thought I could trust you. If that relationship was based on the fact that they did challenge each other and what they thought and what they did, it would have been much, much stronger and much more of an appropriate relationship. The other one that I experienced going into businesses is the bottom right-hand corner, is the whole aggression piece. That's where you start to get no real relationship. And again, in a big corporate organization, people are quite keen to stab each other on the back to get their own leg up the ladder. There isn't a particularly strong relationship, and this is an opportunity to show it. Coupled with that is this perception that somebody knows exactly what you can do, when in reality they can't, because those conversations haven't happened. There you get this whole aggression thing when it goes wrong, and you start getting the us and them, the blame culture, and the emotions start flying around. And it becomes really quite difficult to sort that. So how do you get out of this? It's about transparency. How do you get to that apologetic box? The key for that apologetic box is when someone says, I think we have a problem, okay? And it can be done. I've seen organizations get there. And it's about having a joint understanding of what can and can't be done, what really is needed, and what's really at the bottom of what you're trying to achieve. It's about clarity. If you don't understand what someone's saying, people find it very difficult to say that they don't. It's a sign of weakness, apparently. It's a real sign of weakness when you've walked out of a meeting and someone said something and you haven't understood it and you haven't challenged to say, what do you mean by that? Because those things, in my experience in organizations where it's gone wrong, has come to bite them on the bum. You need to have joint commitments and joint direction of where you're going, and that again needs to be joined up. And it keeps coming back to this challenge. It's okay to challenge. Now, that kind of makes sense to prevent things happening, but actually you can use that model when things are going wrong. A specific example that may be, we had a situation again in this healthcare business where it clearly had gone wrong. So what we did is the chief exec, I said, get out and go and talk to your key customers. You've got to keep talking to the key customers. We have to keep them. It also, of course, freed me up to get on with doing the recovery piece. Through those conversations, we had a situation where we had a call center with about 100 people taking calls. At one particular moment when it went horribly wrong, we knew from our monitoring of calls, we had 88,000 people at any one time trying to get through to the organization with 100 people. We had people sitting on the phone for 8 hours. Now, these people are patients who are critically ill, some of them, and need their medicines that day. It's been compounded to fit their particular need. It may be the nurses, it may be the doctors, it may be hospitals, whatever else. And it absolutely came to a grinding halt. So the CEO went to talk to our biggest customer. And what we did on the back of that was we created within 2 weeks a cloud-based phone system that allowed their customers to come directly through to avoid this bottleneck in the phone lines. It freed us up on the other phone lines. Not only that, but they were very happy to pay for it to maintain those customers. Well, there's a radical thought. We were just completely open with them and said, this is where we are. They came in and funded it and found a supplier with us to set that up within 2 weeks. And they funded it because we were open with them and said, exactly, this is where we are. The other thing that we did, that again, it's just, I'm picking on the same company. Again, in the spirit of openness, every 2 weeks, we did a podcast, a video, at which I would go on there with other members of the team saying, this is where we are. We had hundreds and hundreds of clients we had to speak to, be it the patient receiving it, hospitals, whatever else. Now, we did have support from a PR agency, but there was a video, 5-10 minutes, just explaining to them, this is where we are, this is what's going on, this is what we're doing about it, and this is our current performance. Okay? Everybody wanted us to succeed, and it was really important we were transparent. On the back of that, because they understood what we could and couldn't do, and we're fostering a stronger relationship, we moved from what was an aggressive situation with clients, 88,000 of them trying to phone through in one moment, suddenly it just filtered all the way down. They knew we were busting a gut to try and get it right, and they understood what we were doing. Okay, enablers to recovery. I think a couple of facts. You can't recover with your existing resources. You can't do it. You cannot maintain a business which is under a huge amount of stress and also work on a recovery strategy. You need to get help. And that could be help from external providers in the context of IT to support you with that. We also brought people in on temporary contracts to deal with the bottlenecks that we had at the time. You need to get help. What that also did, of course, was free up the experienced people in the organisation to brief them, to onboard them, to get them going. The other thing I would say too, on the back of this, take it as you will, the existing leadership teams do not tend to survive this process. Okay. That in mind, it's quite interesting. In the corporate culture I talked about before, when you go into a business, they sometimes feel a little bit threatened by you going in. And the number of senior people that come up to me and said, do you know what, I knew this wouldn't work. I knew this wouldn't work. And you sit there going, okay, that's great, well done you. In fact, I should thank them because it gave me a job. You know, again, it comes back to this challenge. Okay, the other thing, again, to say is existing ways of working, systems and processes don't tend to survive this process either. And actually, it's almost a mark of success that you've been able to transition to new processes that are more robust. So it will be really expensive. Recovery is really expensive, and it's not just my fee, but it could be extortionate and even could be terminal for organisations if you don't embrace this. I've been lucky, they've been big organisations that want to survive, and other organisations that the VC supported, and the venture capitalist companies were very keen to secure their investment. Time is not your friend on this. So in your time cost quality triangle, actually time isn't on your side. You have to go for the cost, I'm afraid. There's no getting around it. The other thing I would say is to keep it simple. When you get in there, everybody's throwing lots of ideas at you. You have to come up with a really simple plan. If you don't have a plan, there's no direction for anyone to rally around. That plan will change. You have to start with something. The people have to believe there's a direction in which you're going in. That plan will evolve, and you've got to be flexible enough to do that. The next is really important is setting some smart objectives. I know it's an old cliched phrase, but you really need to have some smart KPIs. Just 1 or 2 to start with. That then links to the diagram you can see on the right there. Again, it's a military background thing. They call it the heli view. It was developed by a guy called Adair, which talks about understanding the coincidence of the individual needs, the team needs, and also the task needs, and it's managing that. Now, if you're going to get a business to rally around and start recovering, you need to set KPIs that relate to each one of those individuals. So we might have a KPI of, I don't know, OTIF, on time in full. Each of the different teams needs to understand how they can contribute to that masthead KPI that you're putting up there. You might just start with a 1. They need to understand that they need matrices to know how they're getting on against that. The whole business needs to be able to relate back, are we getting better or not? Otherwise, you're just driving blind into the future. Once you've got the team, individuals need to understand what they can do to contribute to the team that contributes to the overall OTIF, okay? So that will deliver ultimately the task because you put into the context of the task. And through that, you're empowering the teams because they know which direction they're going, they know whether they're getting better or not. So it's short-term goals, and as you go through it, you start evolving more KPIs as the scenario develops. Short-term interval control is a manufacturing term that some of you might be aware with. When I start with an organisation, you could be having meetings 3 times a day with a collective people around the room. Those are the people who make things happen. Actually, you tend to take away the main leaders. You just get the people that make it happen is more important, okay? And we're all talking about those KPIs and how we're getting them, what we're going to do about it. So short interval control, it normally starts 3 times a day, it then gets down to 2, it then gets down to 1, then once a week as you recover. It's all part of the sort of measurement of success, if you like. Pace is really important, and it's understanding that good enough. What is good enough in this scenario? Which in truth I got wrong. I spent 3 months in Poland where there were absolute perfectionists, and they found it very difficult with this chap from England screaming at them, "No, that's fine, that's good enough, let it go." But actually that's what you've got to do to start with, and it does start impinging on individuals, and I got it wrong because some of them got sick. Lesson learned, I pushed the pace too hard, and that's something I have to do in my role, is to judge the pace at which you can push things, and push it just a little bit further. Open to a fresh perspective as you go through this. And again, this is where you need external support. People can start challenging the way you do things now. Get rid of the sacred cow. Get rid of the that accounting software which clearly wasn't fit for purpose in the organisation. Strong, positive leadership. In a scenario like this, it just needs 1 or 2 people to be negative, and sometimes it's the senior people who aren't there anymore who start being negative because it wasn't invented here. Actually, they have to go. Difficult, but they have to go because it just takes 1 or 2 of them, and that is like a cancerous growth across the whole piece. You have to be positive the entire time to drive it forward, and keep the team motivated with results so they know they're getting better, or if they're not, they know what they need to do to get better. And this whole communication piece, don't bury the head under the sand. I'll go back to the same organisation, this healthcare organisation. They were monitored and audited by numerous government bodies, so the Quality Care Commission, the BMA, the HMRC, is it ringing true for you, Alison? NHS England, and the Royal Pharmaceutical Society. I just went to them and said, we're in trouble. We all have a vested interest in making this work. Please come and look at what we're doing and support us rather than just kicking us. Come on board and get proactive with all your experience and knowledge and help us recover this, which went fine. They all came in. And they all came with recommendations and things they insisted we did. But I found a situation where some of them were in conflict. So what do? You have one regulatory authority saying, I want you to do this, and the other is saying something completely different. So again, being open about it, I invited them all into a room and said, you're asking us to do this, you're asking us to do this, and there's clearly a conflict. Here's tea, here's coffee, shut the door. Please, can you come up with one direction? Because clearly that's in all our interest to get this right. And bless them, they did. There was a lot of compromise. Maybe there's something there for Brexit, I don't know. Okay, so the stages of recovery, and again, this is fairly anecdotal, but it kind of works on this basis, all the different organisations. The first thing you've got to do is stop the rot, get some form of stability. Now, what I need from IT at that time is just basic business intelligence. I need those KPIs, just basic stuff. And again, in some of the organisation, we have improvised around that, finding solutions. They're not perfect. They're sort of, again, sticky back plastic or whatever else it might be, but at least it gave us that visibility. And we then started putting up TV screens around the place as well so people could see how they were getting on against the progress and the targets we set. And that had a big impact. And the teams would rally around these to see where they got to yesterday and today. it was improvised, great teams of guys who were just given the head as far as they were concerned to create these things and were loving it. The next one is once you've got stability, it's then sort of in the recovery. And in truth, you have to recover with your existing systems, however bad they are, because you can't change them at this stage. You haven't got time to do it. You then get on to this, what I call the maintain. So having got to this recovery level, it's normally getting up to the level where you were before, tends to be the target. It's then looking to improve your current systems, customizing those. So you've got your existing teams keeping them going. You then bring in people with a fresh perspective on it, who can start customizing your systems. And actually what I found too, you bring in people from an external perspective. You've got existing people who've worked the same way for years with their systems they know inside out. Somebody comes in with an outside perspective and says, do you realize you can do all of this by just doing this? And so light's gone, you can? That's been really, really helpful in this, just that fresh perspective, people coming in to customize systems and look at different ways of doing it. It's then about securing the future, and it's not like that company, and I say it's a FTSE 100, was persuaded to buy an ERP system. I'm no IT expert, but actually it destroyed them. In fact, in hindsight, having spoken to other people, they had different systems and created a hybrid around that, and they can make it work, as they have done in other organizations. A big bang approach isn't necessarily the right one, but you need support in defining and designing what you need for your business, rather than being told that the ultimate solution here is just to put in an ERP system. Take the lessons learned as you go, and again at this stage organizations are starting to understand how operations work. IT understand that so they can support that, finance understand it, and it starts coming together with these lessons learned, and that hybrid becomes better and better. The next thing is the kick-on phase. It's really, really important that there is a vision of where you go to. Again, I'll go back to the same healthcare organisation because they've done bloody well, to be fair. They said, actually, now we're here, we're going to kick on. We're going to have 2 million patients within 5 years. Remember, they had 1 million, started at 120, and the 1 million point it went horribly wrong. But they believed that. They now understood what they needed to do to get there. They believed it. The staff started believing it, and the customers started believing it. And I'm delighted to say that company now, 2-3 years on, is getting very, very close to achieving that target. But that was the mantra. So they've got all the staff together and talked to them about that. This is where we're going, this is how we're doing it, this is how we've achieved it. That was really, really important, so they can look to the future, kicking on the confidence to go further and to grow. Prevention is clearly better than the cure. As I say, this is me doing myself out of a job. This is kind of IT related. IT, I'm assuming you're all IT here, you are really, really good at project discipline. Identifying risks, identifying opportunities, challenging the scope, and getting people to contain to the scope that's there rather than going all over the place. That is a real skill that the rest of the business doesn't have. You have a real role to be advocates of that across your organizations. These organizations, if that had been in place, would not be in the pickle that they're in, actually. Those disciplines that are ingrained in you all can really prevent an awful lot of these disasters happening. Foster those strong and appropriate relationships with the business. Get to understand how the business works. You can add real value in challenging what they want to do. The number of times I see businesses saying, I don't know, I want an apple pie. And then they'll start saying, okay, well, how big do you want it? You know, how sweet do you want it? And this sort of stuff. And actually, by the end of it, the realization is they don't want an apple pie at all. They actually need an oven. You know, and it is that extreme in many cases. But again, it's challenging that, and the rigors of the processes that you have will really support the businesses in doing it. Challenge the way and your approach to IT. Okay, the guy that had accounting package is an extreme, but you see lots of that in other organizations. Bring in an external perspective to challenge the way you do things. They have the advantage of not being in the same organization for years. In many cases, they go around lots of organizations and have the experience to understand what works and what doesn't work. And again, this one cap doesn't fit all. And I've seen it in one company that's got horribly wrong, thinking that ERP is the answer to everything. It's not. There are other ways of doing it that fit. The organization I'm with now, I went in there, they originally thought that was the way forward. They've been persuaded that was the way forward. Actually, the reality has now come home. It's not the way forward for them. They had stuff that they needed. They just needed to bring it together, which people understood and could work and minimise the transitional activity. And it's now starting to work, which is fantastic. Finally, disaster recovery planning. Yeah, this is extreme. These are business decisions that have gone horribly wrong through poor planning and not enough challenge, if you like. But disaster recovery tends to be, in my experience, an IT-driven thing. Business side has to step up. The business recovery, they have to step up to that and take responsibility and ownership of their own business and the recovery plans. They're the guys that are going to suffer as well if it doesn't work. On the bright side, and I'd like to finish with this, it can be a catalyst for positive change. Extreme business transformation, maybe it is. All the businesses, and it's not down to me, it's themselves, all the businesses actually, like the one I've been describing, have kicked on and been very successful, and they've changed what they needed to change to get there, which is fantastic. I wouldn't recommend it, but it certainly, they have learnt, but they didn't need to do that. Support has been on hand for me, and as you can see, it's a fairly diverse set of circumstances. With Rimini Street, I am here with Rimini Street today, they can bring and have brought to clients of mine that external perspective. They have supported businesses with their own roadmap rather than being driven down a route that says you must just have an ERP system, and have done flexible solutions around that. They've offered also, remember I said at the time, this is bloody expensive to recover, and from what I've seen, Rimini Street offer extremely reasonable prices, and I think you'd all understand and appreciate that as their USP here. They've also supported customizations, which has been very, very helpful for us. And they've also provided support, as you can see there, with the current software that we have. There are other organisations out there that I've worked with are very appreciative of Rimini Street, and others that would have been if they'd used them. So thank you to Rimini Street, and that's why I'm delighted to be standing here today to extol the virtues of them. Right, that's that. Any questions?
I've got a few minutes for questions before everyone dashes off to feed themselves. Any questions around the room? There's a lot of material in there. So.
Presumably when you're planning for a disaster in the military, it's different to when you're planning for a disaster in business, or is it?
No, it wasn't actually. Some of the key things, and people are really important in this because they're going to recover you. The situation I had there, which I really have taken forward and kind of alluded to it, was, I hope I'm not being politically inappropriate, whatever. It was in Northern Ireland, okay? The base had been taken out by the IRA. I had, I don't know, 20, 30 soldiers with me who were shit scared. The base had gone, we'd lost control. It was another regiment, I'm delighted to say, and we were brought in to sort it out. But what I did with each of those teams was give them a specific task. So they work in teams of 4. You as a team of 4, I want you to pretend you're an IRA terrorist and going to take us out. I want Rifleman so-and-so, I want you to think about if you were going to attack us with a mortar. I want Rifleman B, I want you to think about taking us out with a car bomb, which is what they did with us. How would you do it? How would you plan it? Another group was looking at what we call soft targets, the people that could have been taken out by the IRA. Another one was looking at terrorists who lived in the area. From that, these guys started developing real enthusiasm, know what they could do to support it, and started tasking patrols. Where we went, Rifleman Snooks said, look, there's a person here, I think we need to put extra protection on because of whatever it might be. Fine, let's task the patrol to go around there and give them the reassurance. So that in a nutshell is what you're kind of doing in a business. So each of the different teams, be it the call centre, be it the operations team, the production, or whatever it might be, giving them their own responsibility and empowering them and knowing how that cascades up to the overall benefit of what we're doing. So yes, different, again, it's slightly extreme, but the principle's there. It's the people that are going to drive this, and you need to empower them and give them measures to do it.
I've got a question. There were lots of fantastic nuggets of information in there, Charlie. Thank you. I wondered, this is asking the impossible, if you could distill it down and say there was one key message that you would want people to leave this room with and to take away with them, would there be one that you would pick on as... I
think it's this whole relationship thing, and absolutely implicit in that is challenge. Don't be the guy that comes to me when I walk in there and says, I knew this wouldn't work. There's no need for that. You're letting yourself down, you're letting your business down, you're letting all the guys who work there and your customers. Don't sit and fester on it, say it. If it's rejected, fine. you know, it's your decision whether you want to stay in an organisation that you don't believe in what they're doing. It's tough.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we're now on lunchtime, so I'm not sure when the next session after lunch starts. Hang on, I will give you the return from lunch times. So we're on lunch until 2 o'clock. Next session starting at 2:05. Thank you very much. Thanks, Charlie.